America will default on its debt, likely causing the worst financial crisis of the nation-state era. How did the USA get into this mess, and what can you do to prepare for such an eventuality? Well, the numbers are absolutely staggeringly insane when you look at them. The United States in 2018 will have around $3.4 trillion in revenue, and we'll be spending $4.4 trillion. So it is going to add an extra $1 trillion to the debt this year. Currently, the debt stands at $21.7 trillion. The current global derivatives market is valued at over $1 quadrillion, with a third of that exposure directly happening in US markets. This is a whole separate house of cards just waiting to crumble, and a US default may be just such a catalyst. And speaking of mind-bogglingly big problems, household debt in the USA is around $13.5 trillion, mortgage debt around $9 trillion, student loan and car loan debt both around $1.5 trillion each. So it is not like the citizens are really doing much better than the government is doing. Everyone is sucking hard on that teat of cheap debt. Perhaps the most important thing to realize in this entire conversation is that the United States will never be able to pay off this huge debt. It has gone so far out of control. Future generations of Americans will be saddled with a debt obligation of a previous generation so big, it will not only be reprehensible, but impossible to repay. Check out these opinions from some dudes that are not me, who know a lot about this situation.
We now have a $21 trillion national debt. We're at full employment. Our deficit is almost 5% of our GDP. And, you know, what we're doing is honestly completely irresponsible for the next generation. Our kids are being dumped, having a huge amount of debt dumped on them.
The situation is unsustainable, as I think we all know, and represents a dire threat to our economic and national security.
Well, I think it's a different form of what we call stagflation. It has some of the characteristics of buoyancy, but underneath it is an erosion which ultimately will disable the economy unless it's corrected.
You have to really keep in mind as well that it is not as if all of this debt was incurred due to investing in the future of the country by building magnet trains or building new infrastructure like amazing bridges or whatever. No, it has largely come about by increasing tax benefits for the rich, by providing subsidies to the most profitable companies in the history of the world. And of course, continue to spend money on militaristic adventures, which have achieved nothing in terms of security except making the world less secure while lining the pockets of defense contractors. While many people seem to be currently bamboozled about this reality, the next generations of politicians and taxpayers will be unable to believe that so much debt was accrued by greed and financial malpractice. The reality will be that the USA will not only be unwilling but unable to repay this massive debt. This will essentially be the end of America as it is currently understood in popular media, the end of America's military might, the end of America's financial might, and the end of its influence. And the repercussions for the wider global economy will be unimaginable. And please understand that I do not wish this to happen, or do I wish any ill will to anyone in America or anything like that. But look at the numbers. They speak for themselves. The writing is already on the wall. There have been recent moves towards the de-dollarization of the global economy. as the power of alternate poles start to arise in places like Europe and Russia and China and Southeast Asia and Africa and Latin America, America's importance is slowly waning. Major countries are also dumping US debt like it is going out of style, because that is exactly what is happening to it. Countries are increasingly moving away from US debt and moving into things like gold or even alternate currencies like the Chinese yuan. Overall, it seems that many of the world's key economic players are tired of the overt economic blackmail, the overt and covert intervention in almost every single country around the world, either at the point of a gun or at the bottom of a banker's well-polished shoe. There will not be too many outside of the US that will be terribly upset about the downfall of the American empire. The hypocrisy and the hubris of the empire is quite plain for all to see, at least for those who are not mainlining legacy media propaganda. Add to the debt crisis that the end of the oil economy is coming. It cannot be stopped. And instead of the United States choosing to be the leader of the third industrial revolution economy and the biggest champion of renewables, America's corrupt politicians are selling themselves oh so cheaply, I might add, to the fossil fuel giants and mega corporations, thus ensuring the inevitable collapse of the US economy, saddled with debt and out of pace with modern technology. And of course, possibly the end of human civilization if they continue down that path too far. Add into all this technological unemployment. As technology takes off and unemploys huge amounts of people, it's going to be tougher for the average citizen to make ends meet. It's also worth noting that this is, of course, going to affect different industries in different countries in vastly different ways, but the people in the USA are going to feel it the worst. I also want to point out that it is possible to avoid this doomsday economic scenario, but not with the current political class in the USA, who are only beholden to donors. Real, courageous leadership and an activated and empowered citizenry can turn the tide for our environment, for our civilization, and for the future of the planet and our species. But this will probably still not solve the debt problem. There are really two solutions that I see here. Number one, the USA has a massive change of political leadership and ends the insane militarism that we have been seeing from the United States over the past few years, and slowly, over many, many decades, repays the debt by slashing public spending and increasing taxes. Even if this were to happen, it would likely ravage the American economy to such a point that essentially it would mean the end of America as we currently understand it anyway. And American global power would be seriously affected. And all thanks to the excesses of just one generation. It's wild. The second option, the US defaults, leading to the biggest and probably most brutal economic crisis in history. As the dollar free falls, banks collapse, businesses close, riots, the gnashing of teeth and pulling of hair. Let's get biblical for a second there. In general, a very, very bad time for everyone involved. And the more exposure that your country's economy or your business has to the US economy, the worse it will likely be for you. Until one of these two things happen, though, the status quo will prevail, with the US sliding deeper into debt, militarism increasing as the empire convulses in its death throes, and the empty platitudes about human rights are unveiled as the hollow lies, as the country continues to prop up some of the world's worst regimes and dictators and participates in mass terror and death globally, supporting, for example, the genocide in Yemen and killing innocent civilians the world round to an unprecedented degree in these poverty-stricken third world countries or developing countries with drones. America is at war with so many countries, people can't even name them all, which is crazy. And now, of course, the drums of war continue to beat with calls for running off and invading Iran. All to ensure, of course, that corporate profits succeed, and all this being peddled in the name of freedom. In spite of the rhetoric around America being special or unique, this is actually a textbook case of the end of empire. Military overstretch, hubris, massive poverty, total disregard for international law and norms, the emergence of a massive oligarch class. In fact, despite the trappings of democratic institutions, America has effectively become an oligarchy, with socialism for the rich and capitalism for the poor, with a political class fully bought, owned, and subservient to the real ruling class, the rich. And of course, when all this stuff happens, the rich are just going to keep getting richer. The crash will not really affect them, especially anything like it will affect the average person. The rich are going to go and ride out the financial collapse, smoking cigars and drinking champagne on their yachts, while laughing about how they blew up the global economy again. Oops, did we do that? Amazingly, the creditors still believe that the USA will repay this debt at some point, or at least that is what they are telling you. I mean, come on. It's not like the big banks, lenders, and ratings agencies have never lied to us before, have they? 2008. 2008. But there will be a moment in time when the creditors do not believe anymore. When it becomes apparent to all players that the governments and banks who have been telling you that the emperor has clothes on have been lying to you the entire time. The annual interest alone on the debt in America will become unserviceable in the next few decades. And anyone telling you that the situation is under control is either ignorant or lying. This is a crisis which is being completely ignored because those who actually are aware of it and have any power know that nothing can really be done at this point except extract as much wealth as possible before the economy collapses. And then you can, of course, buy all the assets from the collapse for pennies on the dollar afterwards. Rich get rich and the poor get poorer. Now, all of that sounds rather apocalyptic, and you may be left wondering, well, Lark, I'm basically screwed, right? This is a depressing video, man. Why are you doing this? Look, the answer to what you can do, be ready, be knowledgeable, understand it. Please understand that I'm not saying this is going to happen tomorrow either, and I really, really hope that it just never happens. That would be amazing. And a lot of powerful players want this system to remain up and running for as long as possible. But such a destructive and predatory system cannot last, particularly in our modern era. Remember, the only constant in the world is change. But what can you do as a normal citizen while the oligarchs and titans of business continue to build the world's biggest financial bonfire? Well, the best things you can have in a complete economic meltdown are, of course, real estate and not a mortgaged property. The previous collapse in 2008 proved that the banks are all about stealing people's houses. And if you do own your house, make sure you have proof. Make copies. Put that title on the blockchain. Can't trust the governments, guys. Food. And no, I don't mean cans upon cans of beans, although that might be useful too. But if possible to do, then grow at least some of your own fruit and vegetables. Plant an apple tree. Get some lettuces going. It's actually quite easy and can be quite fun to grow your own things, assuming, of course, you do not live in a city. Grab some gold. Gold and precious metals, while not super practical, have been a staple medium of exchange for thousands of years for a reason. We have yet to move past that. But perhaps the most compelling option will be Bitcoin. Because what is often misunderstood in massive financial collapses, or the whole discussion around America collapsing or any of that stuff, is that this will be the end of everything. That we're going to descend into some sort of Mad Max style post-apocalyptic crazy nightmare world. It won't be quite like that. Just millions to hundreds of millions of people losing their homes, losing their jobs, losing their savings, huge companies closing, small companies closing, civil unrest, increased homelessness, despair, and hunger as all of these social safety nets start to fail at the same time. Inflation will skyrocket, leaving people who already have a difficult time making ends meet basically totally screwed. And just keep in mind, half of Americans live below the poverty line. That's crazy. And most people in the USA cannot afford a $1,000 emergency. Okay, yeah, it's kind of grim, but the internet will still be up and running, and as the fiat myth burns in oh so glorious flames, what will arise from the ashes? Maybe barter systems that Apple Tree might come in very useful. Maybe gold, yeah, but remember, gold kind of sucks for day-to-day purchases. You know, it's cutting off little slivers of gold, not super practical. The use case for Bitcoin just got very real very quickly, as it already is in other countries that have suffered from economic mismanagement. In a world of spiraling economic despair, Bitcoin will continue as global, sound, reliable money. Remember that Bitcoin is not controlled by the central bankers that have made the exact mess that so many countries find themselves in right now. Bitcoin does not censor your transactions. You can transact with anyone, anywhere, at any time. The Genesis block of Bitcoin says it all. The banks, the corporations, and the governments are not the solution. Whatever the question was, that was the answer we found, was a bad question. And they never have been the solution. It has always been a lie. It is time for Plan B, time for real money, for the future of our human civilization, and to break once and for all with cronyism, oligarchs, and empire. All of these political machinations belong to the past, not to the future. Time to buy Bitcoin. But hey, those are just my 2 satoshis on the matter, guys. You will let me know what you think about the American debt crisis down below in the comment section. If you enjoyed this video, pop a thumbs up on it. Subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. If you want to stay up to date with what is happening in crypto, hit that notification bell down below. You guys are awesome. I'd love to see you over on Twitter if you ever want to join the conversation there. Long live the blockchain, and peace out till next time.